Hello, hello, hello. How's it going? Everybody, welcome to D4. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. We crunch numbers about them, we theorycraft about them, not with the intent to tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential option for building and playing a character in an attempt to create something that is both really fun, but also really powerful to play in-game. So, if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on a character that you're thinking about creating, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am really, really glad you're here, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby, and I'll be your host. Really quick, if you would like to get a written step-by-step guide to the character that I build today and all the other characters that I build on this channel, or if you're just interested in supporting a guy and helping me create more and better content, then I would love it if you would consider joining the channel as a member. There should be a little button down there that says join. For $2 a month, you get that cheat sheet right up so that you don't have to go back and rewatch the video or even take notes as you're watching if you wanted to recreate the character yourself. And again, it's just a nice way to support me. So huge thanks to all of my channel members. And if you're not interested in joining the channel, I still am grateful that you're here. Just liking, subscribing, commenting are also fantastic ways to support the channel, as my 8-year-old daughter would like to tell you. So it's a pretty great picture, right? Thanks. Yeah. Okay. I get a lot of requests from comments in other videos to build a light cleric. And you know what? I get the appeal. Sometimes you want to play a support character, but one who has some really nice pew-pew spell options. Granted, you could go with a Divine Soul Sorcerer to accomplish that, but maybe you want to have the nice defensive features a light cleric enjoys instead. Heavy armor, more hit points, the pretty nice warding flare ability, among other things. Or maybe you just want to couch your blasting in a righteous wrath of the gods paradigm. And if so, I have no problem with that. Still, I've continued to put off building a light cleric until now, and the thing that really motivated me, actually, to finally take the plunge was a result of something that happened at our weekly D&D game that I play with my friends, and that we record and publish on our sister channel, Tales of Veneria. Check it out there. See, we recently wrapped up Season 1 in Tales of Veneria, and we kind of took a month off. And during that break, we learned that, unfortunately, my good friend Tori wasn't going to be joining us for Season 2. This made me doubly sad because not only is she going to be missed, but the character that she was playing, Eve, was a very tanky Oath of the Ancients paladin who provided really fantastic support for our party. In addition, my character, Saradon, was in a relationship with Eve, and since Eve wasn't going to be with us going forward, it felt kind of wrong and strange for Saray to continue on as well. And Saray was probably our party's biggest burst damage dealer, and the only area of effect or AOE damage dealer that we really had in the party. So losing her was feeling like a big blow as well. And so I've really been racking my brain over the last couple of weeks, scouring all of my old builds to try and find something that could do a decent job of replacing the role of two characters. I wanted something that was fairly tanky, that could provide solid support, but also bring both burst damage and AOE damage, multi-target area of effect damage when needed. And all of these old builds that I've been going over did 2 or 3 of those things pretty well, some of them, but I didn't really feel like any of them did all 4. And then I thought about the light cleric. Tanky? I mean, they're not a bare totem barbarian or anything, but for a full caster, yeah, not bad. You can wear heavy armor, use a shield, you have some defensive options. Supporty? I mean, you're a cleric, so yeah. Bursty with AOE options? Between their additional spells that they get, many of which are unique among clerics, and even their channel divinity, yeah, they're probably better than this at any other cleric. And maybe with a bit of multi-classing could be even better. So yes, that is what we're going to build today. A light cleric that can hopefully at least come close to filling the hole left by 2 characters in our Tales of Veneria game. Now, when I crunch numbers, I'm going to be focused on the AOE area of effect burst damage aspect of this character, and should mention, actually, before we jump in, that the character I ended up building for our game was actually slightly different than this version of the character that we're going to go over. So if you want to know a little bit more about how I tweaked it for the purpose of our game and why, stay tuned for the final thoughts and I'll kind of go over the differences there. But for the rest of us, I proudly present episode 103, The Burst of Light. Huge thanks, as always, to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he created for this episode and this character concept that he creates for the character concept that I send him each week. He's an amazing artist. I love his attention to detail. I love the movement and the color of his artwork. If you're interested in following him or maybe potentially reaching out to see if you could commission him to create some art for you or your party, I will put links in the video description on how to do so. As always, thanks, Randall. But before we jump into the build, whoa, what happened? I changed shirts. I wanted to tell you guys about a new sponsor this week that I'm super excited about. Monkey DM's new 5e compatible book, Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt. Steinhardt's Guide launched on Kickstarter about 3 weeks ago as of this video release, with a funding goal of $25,000, and as of this recording, they've been funded to the tune of well over $1 million. Yes, 1 million. Holy crap, people are excited about this book. And you should be too if you're already not. Let me tell you why. Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt fuses Soulsborne inspiration with Lovecraftian horror to create a monstrous 5e setting book to unleash on your table. Fight against absolutely demented foes, twisted abominations, and fallen friends. Empower yourself as a hunter with blasphemous magic, steal the powers of eldritch beings, and unleash your bestial instincts. Beware of losing your humanity in the savagery of the hunt. Madness is omnipresent, and with over 100 effects, it will shatter your psyche if you're not careful. With an epic 8 unique environment-altering moons, watch the world burn under the fires of a scorching moon, turning the Luyarna's streets into an inferno, imbuing monsters with incendiary qualities. Or witness a void moon's bloody malice that can turn even the calmest of pacifists into ferocious beasts. To fight this insanity, embody any of the new race options from eldritch angels to living dolls. Arm yourself with trick weapons and firearms such as the meat hookshot to pull yourself to your foes and blast their heads off. Unleash the power of osteomancy, the bestial brutality of transformations, or wield eldritch powers never experienced before and put an end to the scourge that plagues Luyarna. So, join the hunt today. Help these guys reach their next stretch goal and take advantage of the awesome perks that you get by backing this project while it's in Kickstarter phase. And the Kickstarter ends in just a little over a week, so you don't have a lot of time. If you're interested, please go to this link here that I'm posting below, and of course I will put it in the video description too. That's how they know that I've sent you, so I would appreciate that. But yeah, if you like Lovecraftian horror and enjoy a little extra trickery and like intensity to your game, you will not be disappointed with Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt. Big thanks to Monkey DM for the sponsorship. Huge congrats on just absolutely destroying your funding goal. Can't wait to see the finished product, and let's jump into the build. Okay, at level 1, for our starting class, we actually are going to start fighter. I do plan on taking a couple of fighter levels on this character for reasons that are probably obvious to most of you, and since that's the case, I'd just as soon start fighter for Constitution saving throw proficiencies, really, above all else. So yes, for this character, when we first meet them, I think they would likely be employed in the service of a church that is devoted to a god like Helm or Apollo. Perhaps acting simply as like a guard for the temple, or maybe being trained as a holy warrior for that deity, starting their training with martial skill, kind of like your basic training or boot camp for religious warriors before moving on to the more theological aspects of their training. Alternatively, you might just start off as a simple mercenary or city watch or professional military grunt who later on is going to experience some sort of brush with the divine that will forever alter your character's path. If you're going to take a route like this, I would definitely talk it over with your DM beforehand to kind of plant the seeds and look forward to, that story arc. But as for our race, I'm going to recommend that we go with Aasimar. I have been wanting to build an Aasimar character for this channel ever since I started it. For my second ever 5e campaign, I actually played an Aasimar Oath of the Crown Paladin. For our Curse of Strahd campaign, his name was Noximus, and I loved him. The biggest drawback to the Aasimar, I felt, was the way their really cool transformation ability required an action to use. But then Mom came along, Monsters of the Multiverse, and changed everything. And yeah, I've especially then been wanting to plug an Aasimar into a build ever since. And I think this Burst of Light character is the absolutely perfect time to do so, both thematically and mechanically. In fact, if it were me, I'd probably work my Aasimar heritage into my backstory and decision to become a light cleric next level. And this might be the brush with the divine that I mentioned. Maybe you're visited by your heavenly ancestor who reveals your true nature and purpose, redirecting your path toward the light. But anyway, as an Aasimar, we get a couple of really cool features I wanted to highlight. First up, Healing Hands, which tells us that once per long rest, as an action, we can heal a number of d4s equal to our proficiency bonus. That's not a huge heal, but it is a really nice way to, bring back a fallen comrade without spending a spell slot, if nothing else. Just one more great way to bolster this character's support capabilities, which I was keenly interested in doing. But the main reason, of course, that I wanted to go Aasimar for this build was for their Celestial Revelation feature, which tells us that when we reach 3rd level, we get to pick a Celestial Revelation for our character, and then afterwards, once per long rest, with a bonus action now, and it used to be an action, and that makes a big difference, we can release the celestial energy within ourselves and transform for 1 minute. Now we get to choose between 3 options for what that transformation looks like. Those options are Necrotic Shroud, Radiant Soul, and the one we will be choosing, Radiant Consumption. Yes, the light burns within us so brightly that it just exudes from our body, shedding bright light in a 10-foot radius, dim light for 10 feet beyond that, and then at the end of our turn, any creature within 10 feet of us, and that includes allies, so be careful, takes radiant damage equal to our proficiency bonus. Also, once per turn, we can do additional damage to one creature equal to our proficiency bonus as well, as long as that creature takes damage from an attack or spell from us. That's a nice little way to add some burst damage to both a single target and to like a small area of effect. And even though we can only transform once per day, it felt perfect for a character who is both focused on big burst or nova damage, and also for a character who is devoted to the light. As for our ability scores, I'm going to recommend going the point buy method as always, and starting off with a 15 wisdom, taking a +2 there, a 15 constitution and a +1 there, and then a 14 dexterity. With our equipment, I'd recommend going the gold buy method as I usually do, and picking up scale mail, a shield, and then whatever other necessities you might have. You could go chainmail here since we're proficient in heavy armor, but since we're dumping strength, that's going to mean a -10 move speed penalty for our character. We're hoping to not be in melee range most of the time, so that might not be a huge deal, but I do think it will be fairly important for this character to be able to move around quite a bit on our turn in order to position ourselves as advantageously as possible. We'll get into that later. So I'd prefer not to give up my move speed if I can help it. Now currently there's really no difference in our armor class between chain and scale with a +2 dexterity modifier. But later on, when we could get plate mail, it would make a difference of an additional 1 armor class versus the best medium armor we could get, right? Half plate. So go ahead and don that heavy armor if you're not too concerned about move speed at that point, or if you could find, some mithril plate armor. But yeah, as a fighter at level 1, we get Second Wind, which tells us once per short rest, as a bonus action, we can heal ourselves for 1d10 plus our fighter levels. That's particularly nice early in the game and just is another way to add to kind of our tankiness and survivability, which I like. And we also get a fighting style. I'm not planning on making weapon attacks with this character, so most of the fighting styles are not going to be too useful for us. Interception is a really nice way to protect your allies, but you have to be within 5 feet of them in order to take advantage of interception, and that would mean bad things if we're using our radiant consumption feature, right? Plus, interception requires our reaction to use, and later on we're going to get a pretty decent, if limited, use of our reaction for defensive purposes. So I think I'd probably just go with the defense fighting style here to give us a +1 to our armor class, making us again that much tankier. Right now, with scale mail, a shield, and our dexterity modifier, plus this fighting style, we'd be sitting at a pretty comfortable 19 armor class, and that is not bad at all for level 1. But at level 2, yes, I think this is the point at which either like our basic training is complete and we're ready to begin our more rigorous religious studies, or at which you have your brush with the divine, because we are taking cleric levels now. And at level 1, clerics get their subclass, their divine domain, and yes, we're going, as I've said, with the domain of light. And since I've never before done a light cleric, let's go ahead and read what Wizards of the Coast has to say about them. Gods of light, including Helm, Lathander, Foltest, Broncala, the Silver Flame, Belinus, Apollo, and Rehoracti. Wow, I do not know how to say that. Promote the ideals of rebirth and renewal, truth, vigilance, and beauty, often using the symbol of the sun. Some of these gods are portrayed as the sun itself, or as a charioteer who guides the sun across the sky. Others are tireless sentinels whose eyes pierce every shadow and see through every deception. Some are deities of beauty and artistry who teach that art is a vehicle for the soul's improvement. Clerics of a god of light are enlightened souls infused with radiance and the power of their god's discerning vision, charged with chasing away lies and burning away darkness. You know what? This is one of the better subclass descriptions that Wizards of the Coast has written, I think. I love it. And reading it just makes me want to play a light cleric that much more. As a light cleric then, first up, we get a bonus cantrip, the light cantrip, which Aasimar already get, so that's redundant. And maybe your DM will let you pick a different one in this case. I don't know. Can't hurt to ask. But then we also get Warding Flare, which is a pretty nice little defensive feature. It tells us that wisdom modifier times per day, when you are attacked by a creature within 30 feet of you, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on the attack, as light flares before them. Now, unfortunately, you have to decide to use this like before the attack is even made, so it might end up being wasted, but it's not a bad thing to use against a hard-hitting enemy bearing down on you, or when you're getting close to going down to 0 hit points, etc., right? And then we get spells, of course, as a Cleric 1. Light Clerics get Burning Hands and Fairy Fire for free, both really pretty decent and thematically appropriate spells. But beyond those, I would probably take the usual suspects for all Clerics, right? We're going to want a damaging cantrip. Sacred Flame is maybe more on point thematically, but Toll the Dead is probably going to do more damage unless your enemy has a high Wisdom saving throw modifier or resistance to necrotic damage. But yeah, Guidance, Bless, probably Healing Word, if not Cure Wounds. You're a Cleric. Be a Cleric. At level 3, we would be a Cleric 2, and we get Channel Divinity. All Clerics can use their Channel Divinity that they can use once per short rest to do one of 3 things. Turn Undead, which lets us use our action to force all undead within 30 feet of us to make a Wisdom save against our Wisdom-based DC, or they have to run away from us for a minute. Harness Divine Power, which lets us, as a bonus action, once per day, for now, spend a use of our Channel Divinity to replenish a spent spell slot equal to half our proficiency bonus rounded up. So first level spell slot currently, which of course is all we have, or Radiance of the Dawn, which is unique to Light Clerics and tells us that as an action, you can dispel magical darkness within 30 feet of you and do 2d10 plus your cleric level in radiant damage to any enemy within 30 feet who fails their Constitution saving throw. Boo. But they take half damage even on a successful save. Yay. It's a pretty decent little AOE ability for now, especially if you're needing to dispel darkness, of course. I mean, it's nothing amazing, but it does scale decently well too, so that's something. At level 4, we would be a Cleric 3, and that means second level spells. Light Clerics get Flaming Sphere and Scorching Ray for free. Flaming Sphere wouldn't be a terrible use of our concentration currently, letting us have a weaponized bonus action if we weren't a Cleric who also just gets Spiritual Weapon, and that doesn't require bonus action, and at this level does a little bit more damage, meaning that we could use it and, say, Bless for our entire party, right? Scorching Ray is a pretty decent single target burst damage spell, but it's a lot more potent if we have Hex or something else that we could use, like Spirit Shroud, that adds damage to each attack, and later on we will get that, so keep that in mind for a decent single target burst damage option. We kind of try to take advantage of that spell in our Flamethrower build, which is like a year old now. Anyway, aside from those free spells, I'd be sure, again, to just, pick up the usuals that are strong support options: Aid, Lesser Restoration, Prayer of Healing, etc. At level 5, we would be a Cleric 4, and we get our first ability score increase or feat. So we're sitting on a 17 Wisdom right now, which means I really want to get a half feat to bump that to 18 and then get something else really cool. Fortunately for us, Telekinetic can do just that, and give us some really nice synergy with what we're about to start doing for our regular Nova round rotation next level. So yeah, that's what I'm going to recommend. As a reminder, with Telekinetic, you can move another creature 5 feet toward or away from you with your bonus action. A creature can move willingly, but if they'd rather not, they have to make a strength save versus your wisdom modified DC. And yeah, being able to move others, even just 5 feet, has almost limitless uses in D&D 5e. If nothing else, getting a squishy ranged ally out of melee range of an enemy will always be useful. We plan to use it offensively most of the time, as we're going to discuss in a second. Oh, also, with Telekinetic, you learn the Mage Hand cantrip and can make it invisible, so that's some nice little utility as well. But at level 6 is where everything kind of comes together for this build. First up, Clerics get Destroy Undead, and that means for right now, any undead that you use turn undead on, if they are challenge rating 1/2 or less and fail their saving throw, they're just destroyed instead of turned, which is really cool, and I hope you run into lots of weak undead in your campaign so you can feel super powerful. But then, more importantly, we get 3rd level spells. I mean, I feel like as a Cleric, you kinda gotta get Revivify, and Motivational Speech might be worth considering for support purposes, but Light Clerics get Daylight for free, which would be more occasionally useful if we didn't have our Channel Divinity, I think. But the two we're really excited about and plan on using in combat for our Nova or Burst round of damage are Fireball, which we also get for free, and are the only Clerics who get access to it, and Spirit Guardians. First up, Fireball, of course, that quintessential AOE Blaster spell we all know and love. It explodes in a 20-foot radius sphere, and anyone caught within the blast has to make a dexterity save or takes 8d6 fire damage, half if they succeed on their save. It's fun, it's explodey, we love it. And then Spirit Guardians, which of course is perhaps the best spell in the game, I think, for concentration-based, round after round, multi-target damage. You cast it as an action, and it causes spirits to flit around you within 15 feet in all directions, and enemies who both start their turn and first move into the area on a turn will take 3d8 radiant or necrotic damage based on your alignment. Now, we made really great use of both this damage and the fact that you can potentially inflict the damage a couple of times in a round on an enemy in our Nature Cleric build a few months ago. So if you want a more in-depth discussion on how to get the most out of this spell, I would say check that out. Also, with Spirit Guardians, any creature of your choice within the area of effect of the spell has their move speed reduced by half, and that's awesome. So, at level 6, it's time for our first damage report, and let's discuss how I envision combat working out here. On round 1, it's a bit of a prep round. We're still going to be doing damage, but it's not when we go Nova. We're going to cast Spirit Guardians with our action, and then just move to get as many enemies within the area of effect of it as possible. And then with your bonus action, go ahead and you transform and use your Radiant Consumption. At the end of our turn, any enemies within 10 feet of us are going to take that Radiant Consumption damage. Then, on the enemies' turns, those that were within 15 feet of us are going to take the Spirit Guardians damage. And then on our turn, now round 2, this is our Nova round. I would simply use my action to throw out a fireball that would hit as many targets as possible. Ideally, at least a couple of those who have already taken some damage from our Spirit Guardians or Radiant Consumption. And then moving in such a way that one enemy would be 5 feet outside of the range of the area of your Spirit Guardians and use your bonus action to telekinetically pull them towards you, causing them to take damage when they enter the area of effect, and then probably doing the additional damage that you get from Radiant Consumption to that guy. And yes, moving an enemy into the area of Spirit Guardians, even if it's against their will, would cause them to take this damage on your turn. Look it up in the Sage Advice Compendium if you need to. Now, I'm going to assume that we've managed to hit 3 enemies with our Fireball, as that's what I did for the Evocation Wizard build that was Fireball focused as well. Evocation Wizard. Obviously, there are going to be times when you're going to get fewer. There will be times when you get more. Nevertheless, I feel it is a reasonable assumption, and therefore, 3 shall be the number thou shalt count, and the number of the counting shall be 3. I'm going to assume we're getting 2 targets with our Spirit Guardians, since it's a little bit of a smaller area, and that's what I did for the Nature and Death Cleric builds that were Spirit Guardians focused. But one of those enemies is going to take that Spirit Guardian's damage twice, thanks to telekinetic pull. I'm going to make a similar assumption that we're getting 2 with our Radiant Consumption, but then one enemy of our choice is going to take additional proficiency bonus damage that Radiant Consumption allows us. So, assuming all of the above. Against a group of enemies that have a +0 to their saving throws, dexterity, wisdom, we would on average do 122 damage on average all together. And against a group of enemies that had a +2 to their saving throws, it would be 116. And compared to all other Nova damage builds that I've done to date, this is better than all of them except just barely the Shepherd Druid, because Conjure Animals is overpowered and broken. And yes, let me address here quickly the complaint that some of you are probably making, that taking total damage done to multiple enemies and comparing it to total damage done to a single enemy, like most of my Nova damage builds do, isn't fair, and that damage to a single enemy is more valuable. To you, I would say, you're mostly right most of the time. Obviously, if there's only one enemy on the battlefield, some big bad boss or whatever, then yes, of course. And yeah, even when there are multiple enemies to fight, single target damage is still often preferable because it can be more effective in completely eliminating an enemy from the fight, thus getting action economy and numbers going in our favor, right? A dead enemy isn't going to be attacking anybody. A bunch of half-health enemies are still going to be making attacks. That said, there is a time and a place for multi-target damage. It's especially useful, of course, against like hordes of weaker enemies, yeah? Taking out multiple targets in one fell swoop that a single target damage focused character just can't match. But even if your Fireball Spirit Guardians combo doesn't outright kill a group of enemies, it can potentially get them low enough that your single target focused friends can dispatch several of them throughout a round, and it might end up being more economical and effective than if everyone were just focused on single target damage. One day, I'm probably going to split my multi-target builds away from the single target ones in the spreadsheet so as to not like muddy the waters, but the reality is I just don't have enough of them built today to have it make sense to do a separate spreadsheet. In fact, I think this is only the 3rd multi-target burst damage build I've ever done. The Evoker and then the Dragon Monk for the other 2. At level 7, with our 2 most important spells secured, I think we need to go back to Fighter here for just one more level because yes, at Fighter 2 we get Action Surge, and it's something that I put on almost every one of my Nova builds because being able to take 2 actions when you really need to is just incredibly powerful. And yes, as a reminder, this would allow us to cast 2 leveled spells in the same turn. Don't forget, the rules say that if you cast a spell as a bonus action, then the only spell you can cast with your action is a cantrip. But so long as we don't cast a spell with a bonus action, and we aren't, we're using telekinetic most of the time, then there is no prohibition against, say, casting Fireball, Action Surging, and casting another Fireball. So long as we have the spell slots to do so, of course. But at level 8, I'm going to go back to Cleric, and I'm probably going to stay there for the rest of my career. We'll discuss another potential detour later, but anyway, for now, Cleric 6, and thus we get a 2nd Channel Divinity per short rest, and this is a really fantastic way to do either a little more area damage when we're not fireballing, or even recover another spell slot with Harness Divine Power, because now we can use Harness Divine Power twice per day. Light Clerics also get Improved Flare, which is a nice little protection feature. We can now use our Warding Flare ability on an attack against us to impose disadvantage, or on an attack against an ally within 30 feet of us. Sort of like an improved protection fighting style. And yeah, again, really kind of helping me feel like this character is able to plug a few holes that were left in my party, right? At level 9, we would be a Cleric 7, and that means 4th level spells. As a light cleric, we get Guardian of Faith and Wall of Fire for free. Guardian of Faith can be a nice little damage dealer, especially if there's a really good choke point on the battlefield, or like an area that you really need to protect. And Wall of Fire can be nice for both damage and like a soft control. But beyond that, 4th level spells, there's some great options like Banishment, Death Ward, Divination as a ritual is nice. Yeah, nothing that I'd really plan on using during our Nova or Burst round, so I'm going to go ahead and say pick your favorites. For our level 9 damage report then, the biggest change since last time we checked is the addition of Action Surge, of course, allowing us to cast 2 fireballs on our Nova round if we so choose. We do also have a 4th level spell slot now to upcast one of our spells. If it were me, I'd probably plan on doing that with Spirit Guardians, since it scales by a d8 per level instead of a d6. And, of course, it does damage round after round instead of just once. Much more efficient. But at this level, against enemies with a +0 to their saving throws, we would do on average 220 damage total on average, and against enemies with a +3 to their saving throws, it would be 203 on average. And that's almost double since last time we checked. Again, putting us very near the top of tier 1 compared to other Nova builds that I've done at this level. And in case you don't know, you can check in the video description to see spreadsheets and graphs that I make to compare these builds to one another. I mean, we really have the ability to just annihilate boatloads of enemy hit points right now. I mean, if you're fighting things that have around 60 to 70 hit points each, and at character level 9, that's not going to be that unlikely or uncommon. There's a good chance that you're just going to one-shot an entire group of them in a single round, if you want to spend the resources to do it. And that's both really powerful and also so much fun. At level 10, we would be a Cleric 8, and level 8 is kind of a big level for Clerics. First up, our Destroy Undead feature jumps up to challenge rating 1 or lower now. A nice little bump for the occasional pesky swarm of undead. We get an ability score increase or feat, and I would definitely bump Wisdom here to cap it at 20. That's going to improve our spell and telekinesis DC, not to mention our heals, our saving throws. It gives us more uses of warding flare, etc. It's kind of a no-brainer, I think. And then we also get the potent spellcasting feature, which is better than Blessed Strikes. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything gave us the option to replace potent spellcasting with Blessed Strikes, which adds a d8 to either a cantrip or a weapon attack. But potent spellcasting lets us add our Wisdom modifier to any Cleric cantrip that we use, and since that's a 5 now, it's a teeny bit better on average than Blessed Strikes, which would be 4.5, and we're not planning on making weapon attacks here, so it doesn't do a lot for us on our Nova round, but of course there are lots of rounds of combat outside of our Nova round, so yeah, it'll be a welcome bump to those times when we're just tolling the dead, and then otherwise moving around the battlefield to whittle enemies down with our Spirit Guardians and telekinesis, or potentially throwing out, a healing word, etc. At level 11, now that we've got our Wisdom score capped, there's an argument to be made here, I think, for taking some wizard levels. The biggest increase that we're going to see to our damage from this point on is simply upcasting both Fireball and Spirit Guardians. So replacing Cleric levels with levels in another full caster class, like Wizard, wouldn't really hurt our Nova round. And, in fact, if you took 2 levels in Wizard and then took the School of Evocation for your Arcane Tradition or Wizard subclass, it would let you get Sculpt spells, which tells us that when you cast an Evocation spell, it doesn't have to be a Wizard spell, just from the School of Evocation. Then you can choose a number of allies within the area of effect of the spell and cause them to basically not take damage. And since Fireball is an evocation spell, this would mean that you would be much more likely to hit more enemies with your Fireball, since you wouldn't have to worry about hitting your friends. If I were playing this character as I've laid it out thus far, I would seriously consider going this route. The 2 reasons not to would be, 1, it would mean that you would have to either sacrifice your dexterity score, which might not be too bad if we were going to be wearing heavy armor anyway, or your constitution score, in order to get your intelligence up to the required 13 that you would need to multiclass into wizard. The other reason not to do it would simply be because you'd be missing out on or delaying other cleric features and higher level cleric spells, including the pretty nice light cleric capstone that we're not actually going to get to by the time we finish this build at level 17, Corona of Light. I'd give it some consideration, but ultimately I decided against going that route for this build, for this video, for our purposes, but I wanted to mention it because I think it's worth considering. But yeah, we are going to just be a cleric level 9 here, which means 5th level cleric spells. And we get Flame Strike and Scrying for free as light clerics. Flame Strike is typically as good an AOE spell as clerics can get at this level, doing 8d6 fire and radiant damage in a 10-foot radius. But it's weaker than Fireball, cast as a 5th level spell, and has a smaller radius to boot. Unless the enemy is resistant or immune to fire damage, I guess Flame Strike would do more damage, but I can't imagine using a 5th level spell to do 4d6 radiant damage in a 10-foot radius area. So I just don't imagine I'd be using this spell. Scrying does give us some nice utility, though. It basically lets us spy on another creature or location from any distance, assuming if they didn't want to be spied on that they failed their saving throw. And that can definitely come in handy in some campaigns. But beyond that, yeah, I'd say Greater Restoration feels to me like it's kind of a must-have as a cleric, as it will let you cure all manner of bad things. And Commune is worth considering, I think. It's a nice little utility spell that you can cast as a ritual and not take up your spell slot, so you can use it to upcast Spirit Guardians. At level 12, we would be a Cleric 10, and we get Divine Intervention. I'm admittedly not a huge fan of this ability. It tells us that as an action, we can implore our deity to intervene on our behalf, describing the assistance that we need, and then you roll percentile dice, and if we get our cleric level or lower on those percentile dice, meaning we've got a 10% chance currently, then we succeed and the DM chooses the nature of the intervention. We can only attempt to do this once per day, and if we succeed, we can't attempt to do it again for a week. And I'm sure that when it works, it's amazing. And I've asked you guys to share your divine intervention stories in the past in the comments, and I've read some really great ones. Don't get me wrong. And yeah, feel free to share yours in the comments if you haven't done so before. I just don't love the low success chance and the lack of control we have over the outcome. I just need to make peace with things that are outside my control, I suppose. At level 13, we would be a Cleric 11, and that means that our Destroy Undead jumps up to a challenge rating 2 or lower now. So ghasts, poltergeists, skeletal swarms, and then we get 6th level spells. Nothing I'd plan on using in combat here, but there are some fantastic support options. Heal and Hero's Feast are among the best, I think, for either a super efficient heal or a mighty powerful buff. For our level 13 damage report then, since our last check, the biggest increases to our Nova round have come in the form of higher spell slots. So yeah, I'm going to assume that we're using a 6th level spell slot to upcast Spirit Guardians, though that might be crazy, and both of our 5th level spell slots to upcast 2 Fireballs, which might be even crazier. As always, we're just exploring what's possible. And yes, we also have capped our wisdom for a better spell save DC, and of course picked up a lot of great support and utility options. And so, against enemies with a +0 to their saving throws, we would do 301 damage on average. We broke the Tricentennial Barrier. And against enemies with a +4 to their saves, it would be 273 damage total on average, spread amongst the group. And yeah, again, keeping us very near the top of tier 1 Nova builds at this level. Again, still with the caveat that we're doing damage to multiple enemies instead of one. And also, we're a high-level cleric with really strong support options and a handful of utility and survivability options to boot, making us both devastating in area of effect damage and nicely well-rounded. At level 14, we would be a Cleric 12, and we get another ability score increase or feat. I'm going to recommend, with a little reservation, taking the Elemental Adept feat. With Elemental Adept, we choose an elemental damage type, and we would go fire, of course, and then going forward, when we do fire damage, and then going forward, our fire damage spells ignore enemy resistance to fire damage. I'm not 100% sold on this feat, to be honest, but there are a lot of enemies out there that have fire resistance, and so much of the damage that we're doing is fire, though our Spirit Guardian damage is radiant or necrotic, remember that. So yeah, it's probably a good idea to kind of hedge our bets here, pick up Elemental Adept at least at some point. I really wish that immune to fire enemies would maybe just become resistant to fire damage with this feat. That would be nice. But hey, also, in addition to ignoring fire resistance, this feat lets you treat all ones you roll for fire damage as 2s. On a 5th level fireball, that's going to equate to a little bit more than 1 more damage on average. At level 15, we would be a Cleric 13. And we get 7th level spells. And yeah, I'm going to say pick your favorites again. I mean, Resurrection is great, Regenerate, Temple of the Gods are all fun and powerful choices. You might want to consider grabbing Firestorm here. Again, it's usually the best AOE spell available to clerics, damage-wise, but still does trail Fireball if you were to cast Fireball at the 7th level. That said, the damage difference isn't huge, and with Firestorm you do get both a lot bigger potential area of effect and a lot more control in shaping it, since it lets you call down sheets of Roaring Flame in 10 by 10 areas that you can kind of put where you want, so long as each section is sort of touching another section, right? So you kind of got to make a snake with it. Might be worth using over Fireball, depending on the situation, even though it's a little bit less damage per enemy. At level 16, we would be a Cleric 14, and this is my least favorite Cleric level in the game. All we get is Destroy Undead going up to challenge rating 3 or less. That's it. I guess since we gained a Cleric level, our Channel Divinity would do 1 more damage. I'm especially tempted to take Wizard levels at this point. But I suppose we'll stick it out, since at level 17 we'd be a Cleric 15, and that means we get an 8th level spell and spell slot, with 9th level spells just around the corner, as well as that aforementioned Light Cleric capstone feature, a Corona of Light, which is semi-decent. As for 8th level spells, Sunburst is really on point thematically, and again, a decent damage dealing area of effect spell, less than Fireball, but potentially blinds your enemies. And that's a pretty powerful condition to inflict. But the other options here are worth considering: Earthquake, Holy Aura, Anti-Magic Field, all potentially strong, powerful, fun. Pick your favorite. But for our final damage report then, again, the biggest increases to our damage since we last checked have just come from higher level spell slots, though we have picked up a teeny increase from Elemental Adept, as well as relief against fire-resistant enemies, and of course some potential added utility and or support options via those super powerful higher level spells. But if we used our 8th level spell slot for Spirit Guardians and our 6th and 7th level spell slots for Fireball, something you surely should not do, except in the most extreme of circumstances, then, against a group of enemies with +0 to their saves, we would do, on average, 377 total damage, and against enemies with a +5 to their saves, it would be 338. And that puts us a little closer to the middle of the pack of Tier 1 by comparison, but still, of course, very strong. And yeah, still bringing really great support options with you along for the ride. All right, final thoughts. The tier score for this character, if we average the damage that they do against all enemy saving throws or armor classes that we calculate for at each of our damage reports, is 224, putting us, again, not surprisingly, very near the top of Tier 1 compared to other builds. Just ahead, actually, of the Evocation Wizard, which, to be honest, kind of blows my mind. Since, the Evocation Wizard is commonly thought of, I think, as the premier, blaster area of effect damage subclass in game, right? But that Evocation Wizard can pretty much just do one thing really, really well. Okay, fine, that's not really true, since they have access to the wizard spell list and can therefore lock down the battlefield probably better than any other class out there. But still, they definitely don't bring the suite of healing and even protective features that this character brings. And actually, thanks to Spirit Guardians and Telekinesis, this character is going to do a lot better sustained DPR than that Evocation Wizard as well. So yeah, I'm kind of feeling like if you're going to play a multi-target damage-dealing blaster character, you just might be better off with the Light Cleric than with the Evoker. And that's honestly not something I expected at all when I first started creating this character. And I love it when I discover unexpected things after doing a build and crunching numbers. So yeah, this one has made me especially happy. Now, I did promise the alternate version of this character that I ended up using for our Tales of Veneria game. And so let me go over it briefly. In a nutshell, it's a little bit of a mix between this character, the Nature Cleric build that I did, and the Stars Druid that I did a few months ago. I don't know if I have cards left to link to it, but if I do, it's there. Going this route made me a lot better at sustained DPR while sacrificing a little bit of that Nova round AOE burst damage, but also gave me a little bit stronger support or healing options. So instead of taking 2 fighter levels, I went with 1 level of Dao Genie Warlock to pick up some bludgeoning damage, took the Crusher feat, which lets me move an enemy 5 feet in any direction once per turn when I do that bludgeoning damage, then 2 levels of Stars Druid for a bonus action Archer form ranged attack, and the rest of my levels in Light Cleric. I went custom lineage for my race instead of Aasimar because I was a little more feat heavy, and starting with a free feat just was really, really helpful because I also wanted to get resilient constitution for constitution saving throw proficiency since I didn't start fighter. But then in combat, once I've got Spirit Guardians up, I hit an enemy with that Stars Druid ranged attack, applying the bludgeoning damage from Dao Genie, letting me move them into my Spirit Guardians, and then on subsequent turns doing that, but then also with my action just thorn whipping a second enemy into the area of effect of the Spirit Guardians as well, dealing a bit of damage to 2 targets twice in 1 round, but still letting me have access as a Light Cleric to Fireball if and when I needed it to soften up or maybe finish off a group of enemies when the situation calls for it. And then the Stars Druid does give me a little bit more healing utility support thanks to Chalice form for extra healing, plus, nice spells like Goodberry, plus, just a little bit more damage on that second target with the Archer attack and move as opposed to Telekinesis. I honestly cannot wait to play it. And I feel like it's going to do a really great job of at least partially filling all of the roles that we've lost with our 2 missing characters. So feel free to tune in to Tales of Veneria and find out how it goes. But that is the build for the week. So thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. You are the best. Thanks for all of your support. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope that you'll check out the other content in the channel if you're not really in the habit of doing so. But more importantly, I hope you have a really great day and a fantastic week. And I hope that you stay safe and that you're good and that you're kind and that I see you again really soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Tell the world that we finally got it all right. I choose you. I will become yours and you will become mine. I choose you. I choose you. Let me be a romantic. Okay, back off. It's a good song. That's weird. We are experiencing technical difficulties. Okay. Up, down. Microphone problems. Unique, really. Many of which are unique to Cleric. Oh, snap. I forgot to include that in the numbers. Son of a... Go. No, do what you were doing. Do what you were doing. Stand over the side, and then I'll laugh and kind of have you come on screen. Okay, hold on. We would do on average 200 and... Whoa, nope, it's different. If an enemy is ways to help support the channel. You're supposed to do that sooner. I mean, you can get it right there. That's fine. And maybe, sure, in front of my face might make it funny. Fantastic ways to help support the channel. You need to do it faster, honey. Got to do it faster. Okay? Okay, I'm going to start over. Don't do that. Okay. Okay, thanks, honey. Shut the doors, please. Yeah, can you close them both? Thank you. I have been to the Redwoods many times, and I like them. They're so pretty. And my chair is so squeaky. I really need to get a new chair.